I spotted my daughter, Lily, outside Ridgehaven Elementary, sitting alone on the curb, clutching her favorite brown sweater like it was armor. A group of girls stood nearby, whispering just loud enough for me to hear. "That sweater looks like something from a grandma's closet," one said, her voice sugar-coated and cruel. "Don't worry, she'll never get into the country club. Not with that sweater. Our moms won't allow it." The laughter cut straight through me. Lily's shoulders hunched tighter, her knuckles white around the sleeves of that brown sweater, her late grandmother's favorite, the one she wore whenever the grief of losing her bubbled too close to the surface. It was her way of keeping a piece of love wrapped around her. But instead of comfort, the whispers stripped it from her, turning something sacred into a punchline. She didn't cry. She just folded into herself, and somehow, that hurt more than tears. My daughter was learning too young what it felt like to be erased. That same afternoon, I passed a cluster of Ridgehaven moms at pickup. Perfect hair, oversized sunglasses, manicured nails wrapped around their lattes. Their voices carried like a broadcast. "Once the new country club opens, it'll finally separate the families from those who shouldn't be here," one said, lips curling in a smirk. "Finally, a place where we don't have to mix with just anyone," another added, letting her eyes slide over me like I was invisible. Not one of them had the faintest clue how wrong they were. I drove home in silence. Lily stared out the window, her cardigan now draped protectively across her lap. Her reflection looked smaller, dimmer, like the light in her had been pushed down by their laughter. Another day my 10-year-old begged me not to pick her up in the Prius. Another day of watching my brilliant, kind daughter shrink into herself because the moms at Ridgehaven and their daughters decided we didn't fit the image. What Lily didn't know was that the one thing they bragged about most was already mine. From the window of my Willow Street rental, I watched the construction crews raising beams for the new country club. Neighbors gossiped nonstop, voices bright with excitement about how it would elevate the neighborhood. Vivian Prescott, of course, was the loudest. Every day she bragged as if the country club were her personal legacy. Every day I listened to her boast. Every day I watched them build. They thought it was theirs. But the truth? The country club belonged to me. Even Lily didn't know what I really did for work. I kept everything simple, quiet, normal. Just a divorced mom and her daughter starting fresh. No designer clothes, no flashy car, no bragging about my job. I thought staying under the radar would give Lily a chance at real friendship. I was so wrong. Because in Ridgehaven, belonging wasn't about kindness, it was about power. Vivian Prescott ruled Ridgehaven Elementary like royalty. 45, manicured, armed with a white Range Rover, and a husband she paraded like a stock portfolio. Her daughter Charlotte was a carbon copy. Pretty, polished, and mean enough to believe cruelty was a birthright. The first time I met Vivian was at the school coffee morning. I wore jeans and a Costco sweater. I drove up in my old Prius. Lily had been glowing, excited to meet new friends. But Ridgehaven moms didn't look at me with welcome. They looked at me like an intruder. The first time Vivian turned her attention on me, I felt the weight of it instantly. She lowered her oversized sunglasses just enough to make eye contact, her smile too polished to be kind. "Oh, hi! I'm Vivian, and you are?" "Isabella, Lily's mom." "Oh, you must be the renter," Vivian said, eyeing me up and down. "Well, that makes sense now." The other moms giggled behind their lattes. Vivian stirred hers with a diamond-tipped nail. "I'm sure you'll find your circle here. There's a great group of moms down at the apartment community." The laughter that followed stung sharper than if she'd shouted. One phone call, and her smug smile would have crumbled. But I stayed silent. For now. "What does your husband do?" Camille Walsh leaned in eagerly. "I'm divorced," I said. The silence was instant, heavy. Vivian's smile sharpened. "That must be challenging financially, especially in a town like this." "I manage," I replied. She tilted her head, feigning sympathy. "I'm sure you do, sweetie. Single mothers have to stick together, don't we?" Still, brave of you to move somewhere so aspirational. Her tone dripped condescension. Aspirational. As if I were pretending to be something I wasn't. The other moms responded to her like plants turning toward the sun. When she shifted, they shifted. When she laughed, they echoed it. She didn't need to announce herself. Her approval was the air they all seemed desperate to breathe. If only they knew who I really was. I forced a small nod and shifted my gaze toward the school doors, where Lily was shuffling past, biting her lower lip in that way she did when trying not to cry. She didn't look back at me. And I knew she had caught enough of Vivian's tone to understand it, too. Vivian pivoted seamlessly, her voice carrying again, this time for her audience. "I need to pick up my gown for the country club opening," she announced, lifting her phone high enough that the designer's name flashed on the screen. "Oh, I'm so excited for the grand opening," one mom replied instantly. "The new dining hall is supposed to be incredible. My husband says the membership list is going to put Ridgehaven on the map," another chimed in, adjusting her scarf with a nervous laugh. Vivian nodded graciously, like a queen receiving tribute. Then her eyes flicked to me again. "Of course it's important the club maintains an exclusive image, don't you think?" Vivian's eyes flicked over me again, deliberate and slow. Then her lips curved into that polished, pitying smile. The moms beside her tittered into their lattes. I caught the glance at my shoes, my handbag, and realized her words weren't about clothes at all. They were about placement. Who fit the picture, and who didn't. Her daughter, Charlotte, was already a reflection of her. Charlotte stood with a group of girls nearby, whispering and smirking, her eyes darting toward Lily's sweater. "She's wearing her ugly sweater again," she stage whispered, loud enough for the whole group. Another girl smirked. "I would rather wear a trash bag than that." The laughter that followed wasn't loud, it was sharp, precise. A few pointed glances, a shake of the head, the kind of dismissive snickers meant to slice without leaving marks. Lily's knuckles whitened on her backpack straps. She didn't cry. She just folded in on herself, as if she could shrink small enough to disappear between the cracks of the sidewalk. The following week, I arrived at school a few minutes early. The girls were outside, practicing their cheer routine for the spring assembly. Music pulsed faintly from a small speaker, the chants sharp and rhythmic. Lily stood near the edge of the blacktop, her sweater tied clumsily around her waist, eyes bright with hope. She'd been practicing those moves in her bedroom for weeks. I knew how badly she wanted to be included. When the girls huddled to pick sides, she stepped forward, lifting her hand slightly. "Can I join?" For a moment, silence hung. Then Charlotte wrinkled her nose, loud enough for everyone to hear. "No, Lily!" She turned back to her friends and whispered something, and within seconds they all spun around. Their shoulders shook as they tried to hold it in, but the laughter spilled out once they thought they were far enough away. Lily's hand dropped back to her side. She gave a tiny nod, her face carefully blank, and stepped away. She sat down on the curb, clutching the hem of her sweater so hard her knuckles whitened. I wanted to storm across the playground, to shout that she didn't need their approval. But instead, I watched, memorizing every cruel smirk and whisper. Because what they didn't know was that they were rehearsing for more than a cheer routine. They were rehearsing for their own downfall. Each incident was building toward something they'd never see coming. One afternoon, Lily walked through the door with her backpack slung low, her sweater now bunched in her arms like a shield. "How was the field trip, sweetheart?" I asked, trying to sound upbeat. She shrugged. "It was okay." Her voice was flat. Her eyes were fixed on the floor, not on me. "Did you have fun riding the bus?" She hesitated, then whispered, "I just sat by the window." "Both ways." "Didn't you sit with one of your friends?" Her lips curved in a tiny, sad, almost smile, the kind kids make when they're trying to protect you from how bad it was. They all walked past, seat after seat, Some looked at me, then kept going. Her voice broke for just a second before she steadied it again. "It's fine, Mom. Maybe I'm just different." I pictured it, my daughter, pressing her face against the window, watching the world blur by while other girls chatted and laughed around her. Her reflection growing smaller with each mile. But the worst was still to come. 1 week later. The new country club was still under construction, but already it dominated Ridgehaven conversations. One Saturday, Lily and I walked past after a grocery run. She slowed, staring at the stone pillars rising against the sky. "It's pretty," she whispered. There was longing in her voice, soft and unguarded. Before I could answer, a car rolled up beside us, a glossy black SUV. The window slid down and there was Vivian, sunglasses perched high, her daughter Charlotte in the passenger seat. "Well, look who's here," Vivian said, her voice honeyed with fake sweetness. She glanced at the grocery bags in my hands, then at Lily's worn pullover. "You know, once this place opens, it's going to really elevate the neighborhood. Not everyone's cut out for that kind of standard." Charlotte leaned toward the window, whispering something to her mother, and they both laughed. Lily's face fell so fast it nearly broke me in half. She took a step backward, her arms wrapping around herself like she was trying to hold the pieces together. Her eyes stayed fixed on the ground, and I could see her lips moving silently, probably counting or reciting something to keep from crying. I wanted to scream. To throw the grocery bags at their windshield. To tell them exactly whose money was funding those walls. But instead, I swallowed it. Because I knew the time wasn't right. They thought they were gatekeepers. But what they didn't know was that they were standing at a gate I already owned. This next humiliation would push me past my breaking point. 2 weeks later. Word of Charlotte Prescott's birthday party began drifting through the halls like a promise. It wasn't just a party, it was being marketed like an event. The mother planning it had a reputation for turning milestones into productions, and rumors of photo booths, catered tables, and a city DJ spread fast. By Friday, the whispers reached their peak. My daughter sat in the middle of it all, quiet, waiting for her invitation to arrive. None ever did. When the weekend came, she checked the mailbox twice. Then she turned to her phone, hoping for at least a message. What she found was worse. A group chat lit up with photos of glossy invitations tied with ribbon. Captions bragged, "This is just the start. Wait until the club opens." Her name was nowhere on the list. The following Monday, bright invitations had been replaced with souvenirs, party favors weighing down designer backpacks. Girls set out bracelets and luxury cosmetics like trophies. My daughter stood nearby, her sweater now pulled down over her hands, clutching a book as if it gave her a place to belong. When one girl leaned over with a grin and asked what she was wearing to the party, the laughter that followed made it clear they had choreographed the cruelty. That night, she curled on her bed, whispering into her pillow, "I just want to fit somewhere." I sat beside her, smoothing her hair, rage and guilt twisting in equal measure. When I asked if she was okay, she just nodded and whispered, "It's okay, Mom." I'm used to it. Something inside me finally snapped. The night of the grand opening of the country club arrived draped in gold light. Cars lined the drive of the brand new Ridgehaven Country Club, headlights sweeping across the marble columns I had spent 2 years designing. Inside, crystal chandeliers cast glitter across polished floors. A string quartet played softly in the corner. Women in sequined gowns clutched champagne flutes, voices rising with rehearsed laughter. And there, in the middle of it all, Vivian Prescott. She floated through the crowd in her designer gown, lips painted in her signature shade, her voice carrying like it always did. "It's about time Ridgehaven had standards again," she told her circle of admirers. "This club will finally separate us from certain income brackets." Her glance swept past me without stopping, as though I were a server carrying trays. Lily stood beside me, her familiar brown sweater draped elegantly over her dress. No longer armor, but a choice. Then the host tapped the microphone. The crowd hushed. In exactly 60 seconds, Vivian's world would crumble. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for the grand opening of the Ridgehaven Country Club. It is my great honor to introduce the visionary behind every inch of this project, the woman who restored this landmark to life. Isabella Reyes. Gasps rippled like thunder. All at once, heads turned. My name rang through the ballroom like a secret no one expected. Vivian's champagne flute slipped from her manicured fingers, crystal shattering against the marble floor. The color drained from her face so completely that her foundation looked like makeup on a ghost. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. No sound emerging. Lily's hand found mine. Her eyes widened. "Mom," I stepped forward. Not in a gown dripping with jewels, but in a simple black dress that belonged to me, not to them. The spotlight found me anyway. "Thank you," I began, my voice steady. "For months I've listened to speculation about who was building this club. Old money, new money, which families were worthy, which weren't. I let my gaze settle on Vivian, whose hands were now visibly trembling. You said stability mattered, Vivian. You said standards mattered. Tonight, everyone sees whose standards really don't." The air in the room thinned. Around Vivian, women literally stepped backward, as if her humiliation might be contagious. This place was never about exclusion. It was about restoration, belonging. And belonging does not come from your zip code or your designer label or the size of your house. Vivian didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stood there, her smile frozen so tightly it looked carved in porcelain, her eyes wide and unblinking as the crowd's whispers closed in. The mask she'd worn for years, perfect, untouchable, superior, was suddenly the very thing that betrayed her. Belonging comes from character, and the sad truth is, those who are quickest to shut others out usually reveal the most about themselves. Charlotte tugged desperately at her mother's dress. "Mom, stop smiling like that. Everyone's staring." But Vivian couldn't stop. Her perfect composure had cracked completely, and the ugly truth of who she really was spilled out for everyone to see. A murmur rippled through the crowd. "I can't believe she treated them like that. No wonder her daughter acts that way. Did you see how she looked at Isabella that first day?" "This club was never yours to gatekeep," I continued, my voice carrying to every corner of the ballroom. "It was mine to build, and it belongs to everyone who walks through these doors with respect." The applause started hesitant, one pair of hands, then another. But soon it rolled into a wave, filling the hall, drowning out Vivian's quiet sobs and the silence that had ruled Ridgehaven for too long. I glanced at Lily. She was smiling. A real smile. When the clapping finally died down, I watched the aftermath unfold. Mothers who had spent months in Vivian's inner circle now avoided her gaze entirely. Some approached me with awkward apologies. "Isabella, I had no idea. We never meant anything by those comments." But the most satisfying moment came when I saw Charlotte standing stiff at the dessert table, her face blotched red, no trace of her usual smirk. Her friends had slipped away, whispering in corners, sneaking glances at her as though she carried her mother's humiliation like a stain. Only hours before, Charlotte had laughed at Lily's brown sweater, certain it marked her as less. Now the room buzzed with the cruelest irony. That the girl she mocked for wearing something plain had a mother who could buy Charlotte an entire shopping mall without blinking. Charlotte's shame wasn't just about her mother's downfall. It was the sick realization that she had measured worth by fabric and lost the only game she thought she understood. In the weeks that followed, the country club became something different than anyone had predicted. It stopped being a monument to exclusion and turned into a gathering place where neighbors came to lift one another up. The air was lighter, the laughter more genuine, and for the first time, people walked through those doors without wondering if they were being measured against someone else's standards. Vivian's absence was as loud as her presence used to be. She stayed away from the galas, the luncheons, the tennis matches. Shame had driven her into silence. her once commanding voice reduced to whispers behind tinted car windows. She couldn't face a world that had seen past the armor she thought would protect her. And in her retreat, the truth about her emerged. Her cruelty had never been confidence. It was fear. Fear that someone else might take the spotlight she clung to. Fear that worth could be shared instead of hoarded. Her plan to gatekeep Ridgehaven had backfired spectacularly, leaving her exposed as the most insecure person in the room. The lesson was undeniable. Power built on exclusion collapses under its own weight. The people who spend their lives building walls are the same people most afraid of being left outside them. That is what Vivian never understood. And that is why she lost. Meanwhile, Lily became stronger. She learned the rules of life faster than most children her age, that not everyone carries good intentions, that kindness can sometimes be met with cruelty. But knowing this early gave her resilience. She walked taller, not because she learned I owned the country club, but because she discovered something greater. She could face hardship, withstand it, and still come out standing. She still wore her grandmother's brown sweater, even though she could have had anything money could buy. That choice wasn't about lack. It was about strength. She wore it as a reminder that real worth isn't in what others mock, but in what you choose to carry with pride.